Shick, and I am the, I think Lev gave me a new title just recently. I don't know if it's going to stick or not, but it's the lead engagement and solution architect for Second Life. So how nice is that? We'll have to see what that entails. With me is, let me start the slideshow, sorry. With me is Carolina Perera, a Spanish instructor with the Modern Language Department, and we also have Tina Oestreich. Did I pronounce that right?
It's all right.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. Who is going to be talking about some of the research that we've actually been able to do in a Second Life and how it relates to Spanish speaking skills. So let's move on. CASE has had a presence in Second Life now for 3 years, thanks much to the work that NMC has done for us in creating the beautiful campus that we have. And we've been using that quite extensively for lots of different purposes. This slide right here focuses on some of the things that we do at CASE that have learning involved with it. So. Professors have been able to use this to conduct office hours. We can do peer-to-peer tutoring there. We even have special areas set up where students can come in and do that kind of tutoring together. We have traditional classrooms. We also have classrooms that are non-traditional, like underneath the water, and some classrooms that don't actually exist in real life. We have very successfully used it to have expositions of student works, especially with the digital storytelling, and where we invited global audience of avatars to come in and actually talk to the students and view their digital stories and interact with them surrounding that. We do simulcasts of special events, just like we're doing today, and we do have some recreations of some of the facilities that we have in the real world at CASE. We have them recreated in Second Life. For instance, the Virtual Worlds Lab that Dr. Mark Buckner has. We have taken that and actually created that in Second Life. So he uses that to take students and parents on tours of the facility and just to be able to kind of show off some of the things that he has. And then one of the things that we started to do, actually NMC did not build this one building for us, and you'll be able to tell that is the case, and that is a Latin coffee shop. And that leads me into the story of how we began to do that. Carolina came to us, about 2.5 years ago, and wanted to know if it was possible for her to use Second Life in her Spanish classroom. And so we then began a conversation. I think originally you wanted to work with Alice, which is a 2-dimensional program that you can interact with. So when she came and heard that we have Second Life at CASE, she was definitely on that right away and wanted to get into it. So, the story has been absolutely wonderful. What we started to do just in conversation between Carolina and I, as an instructional designer and as a support person for Second Life, wanted to know what we could do for her as far as building and scripting in Second Life that would allow her students to have an immersive environment and yet a safe place for her students to come, rather than just starting them off in like Second Spain, which can be a little bit rowdy sometimes, as we've seen. So it's actually been wonderful. I think I wanted to show you just a little bit. This is just a little image of the Spanish Plaza that we built. It's not a very large area. We have, however, because we've had success with this now, we've have an entire area on one of our islands that actually is going to be devoted to language classes. So if Tina, who teaches German, wants to come in, we can create a German environment for them as well. So here is just a tiny little movie that shows me dancing. I'm kind of alone in here, but I'm doing a little bit of a salsa. If this movie is going to work for us, let's see, it might not. I don't want to waste too much time. At any rate, there we go. It shows Suzanne. There's animations inside the Spanish Plaza. There's artwork. There's a place for people to sit down. We have beverages that the avatars can eat. We have a place where we can stream media in there as well, which Carolina has used. And so at any rate, then from here, she has taken them out into the big world of Second Life, and we're going to go into Carolina's talk now.
Okay, hi. Yes, as Sue was talking, the Spanish Plus idea comes from an original place in Caracas, Venezuela. It's called El Atillo, and that's where I got the idea of the little house. It's very useful because I start meeting with my students there. Okay, it's we also have done interviews there. We streamed, as Sue was explaining, a presentation there. So I will combine the use of Second Life in my Spanish class. The idea is to incorporate technology to cover other areas of language not learning not included in the book. Sometimes I find myself that the book doesn't cover real life situation, or it's just related to a specific topic. And then how do you move towards a more real life use of the vocabulary? How do you bring culture into all that? Though the book is very good, having at the end a chapter of Chile, okay? But more than going to the places, they want to know what people really think about the place, what do they do in their spare time, jobs. So that's how I started visiting Mexico, Plaza Valladolid, to have that input from the native speakers there. Here's an example of, we met in our Spanish Plaza, then the students went to I think this was in Mexico, either Mexico or Colombia More Island. So the student here had a chat. So they would take either snapshots or videos to present to the class so I could see their work. So if you take a look here, I know it's in Spanish, but my student is Mariona Kately, and Mariona is the person she met in Second Life. So here she says, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and see you the next time. And sometimes they get feedback of how good their Spanish is. So that's an input that I can't provide them. I can provide them with a grade. I can tell them that I think they have done great improvements. But when they actually go to the real world and get some feedback like that, I think it's very encouraging. Okay. Then what we do in my class is field trips. They give presentations, meaning they create short stories. We'll talk about the short stories. But sometimes I've seen that they want to do research, especially the ones that fear of meeting people in Second Life. So we have this example of the girl that wanted to talk about the dangers in Second Life. So apparently this was an island that there had been some shooting and there was blood in her presentation. I don't remember where. But she wanted to explain that there was violence also in there. We have also seen sometimes cases of students that go to a plaza and meet people, and they get there's some ways to put the avatar in a little cage. So it's how the students tell them that's not nice, all in Spanish. You have to let us go. We are working in a classroom. So all that is part of having to speak in a vocabulary that they're not prepared for. Right. So here we have the virtual classroom tours to different islands, okay, that I've taken from presentations. Here we meet and talk. My idea for next semester is to encourage students to meet, okay, to see if I can have more audience than what we have in real life when we do our Mesa Hispanica, that sometimes because of the schedule, we cannot have all the students there. So at least give them the option to meet there, and also work with another professor in University of South Florida that will join my class. Here's a sample. This is from a slide from the first time I used Second Life, and this was a story about a student that wasn't sure that he wanted to get married with his partner in Second Life, was that girl, his classmate. So he went all around the world and to see if he was sure that he wanted to get married with her, and then at the end they end up getting married. So, but right now everything has changed. There's more, students know more what is Second Life, okay? So they're more, I have examples that a story that included two students that wanted to get married but were different religion. So religion came into my class to discuss different type of religion, something that was not included in the book. So I think that was very interesting. Boys giving adventures all around the world, traveling, wild animals, because they go to zoos, and so that's very interesting too. Also, what it brings is, for example, interesting topics like students that meet people that speak another language, like Catalan in Spain, so they want to know what's the difference. So those kind of things would have never come out in a class. Okay, so now that was the interviews that I've done in Second Life. we had the chance to bring Dr. Madeline Camera to give a presentation in real life, and it was also screened in Second Life. So for those students that weren't able to be on campus, okay, had a chance to be there. This is art exhibition. This is from a painter from Venezuela, Maria Teresa Hillman. This is a representation of women that live in a specific town in Venezuela. So she gives the explanation of what the art is. So I had a chance to speak about what the work of this lady was in class, and they could go in Second Life to see the real art pieces that she's producing. Then in this semester, I had the opportunity of teaching Spanish for legal professionals. So I wanted to bring to that class a speaker that was a very sensitive topic. It was about political, here's in Spanish, but it's the political opposition from a virtual world as a space that allowed the freedom of speech. Part of my class was talking about freedom of speech, and I thought it would be a great idea to use Second Life, the private grid, to bring the speaker in a safe environment. We had students from my class, we had students from Oberlin College, faculties from Oberlin College. So it was a very safe environment, and I felt safe as well as a speaker to speak about Chavez in Venezuela. So though I put this little slide here, because though some of us would think that Chavez, we wish that he would be only in virtual reality, we do have him in real life, and then we do have consequences of not being able to express, or people that are living in Venezuela, lawyers like what we're going to talk in a few minutes, cannot express completely of what is going on. So I think it's very interesting. I get questions from my students that sometimes I might not be able to answer as well as people that are living there. So since we have him in real life, a way to address and get a feedback was to bring Alfredo Romero. He's a lawyer from Venezuela. He has a master in Georgetown University and also London College. And the most famous part of his job right now is that he has the case of Chavez in international court. So the picture that we have here, it's a picture that he took with his cell phone. So it was never seen in Venezuela in any newspaper or anything, because this student from a university went on a strike and ended up in prison. So he was the lawyer defending all the students that were just protesting, no reason to be in prison. So that's my idea of bringing him to the class to talk about freedom of speech, and that's his avatar. After that, he wanted to change to be more sporty, and he got to choose how to be dressed and be part of designing how he was going to talk.
Right, exactly. To say something about it, it was really fascinating to watch Alfredo come into the Second Life for the first time, and it was in the private grid because we knew it would be a safe environment rather than in the public grid. He didn't want to talk in the public grid. And he was so funny, loved the flying, but one of the things he wanted to do is he wanted to know if there was a kissing animation, because, you know, the Latino men, right? They like to greet women with a little kiss, and we didn't have anything like that, so we'll have to think about those cultural cues next time, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. We just need to bring it into the private grid.
So yes, I was giving this presentation a few days ago, and they were asking me, like, isn't it funny that you're using internet to bring a sensitive topic? It's something that you wanted private. Why are you using internet? And I said, well, after we gave this presentation in Venezuela, a 67-year-old leader who was a governor went in prison for coming here to the U.S. I believe he was in Washington, and he spoke about the situation in Venezuela, how dangerous it was when he went back to Venezuela, and right now he's in prison. So we got Alfredo to talk about saying much more risky things and sensitive topics than what this person spoke here in the U.S. So this is a sample of the presentation that he gave. Here he says that 80% of the Venezuelans are more worried about insecurity. And if you see what the leaders of Venezuela and the government say, there's no such thing as insecurity. The levels are very low. So these numbers that he gave here are very, very huge in comparison to what you can see in a newspaper in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. So that's he spoke about the prisons, how many death we have in Venezuela's prison, and the lack of human rights that you see there. want to have the next one. If we see in this slide where it says, the last column says muertos, how many dead people we have in Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, the total is 100 in prisons. So we have a number here in Venezuela that's 422, a violent death. So this is something that is completely ignored by the government and not accepted at all. Okay, so these are also pictures that he mentioned. These are people that participated. They were leaders of the police department when there was a coup d'etat in Venezuela back in 2002. They are held in prison right now. No process has started. As you can see, it's been more than 5 years. Okay, they don't know why they're being accused of. They just remain there waiting to be heard and to start a process one day. This is his conclusion, how the government uses the word justice for political persecution. That's the justification of these people are in prison because we're doing justice. Justice is to go against the people that have a different thinking or view. Then he says the national government has demonstrated publicly that the international courts, okay, he disregards any comments that they make about violation of human rights in Venezuela. And in the international court also, okay, whatever they, when you hear from news from the United States, he just says they're just trying to get involved with Venezuela or just political reasons. He always denies these comments that he made, that he said that were really happening. And the next one. My conclusion of all this is that today we hear the political opposition of Venezuela for educational informative purposes. And I hope that one day the virtual world is not the only way, okay, to hear these people from Venezuela because of the lack of freedom of speech that we see that's happening every day and increasing in Venezuela. Though I use the Second Life to promote and give this feedback for my student, at the same time, at the end when I finished giving that class, I was saying, like, I hope this is not the only way I can bring to my students what's happening in Venezuela. So we have this little video also to show you from a company that came from California.
Can I ask a question before you roll into
Yes.
And what about other folks in Venezuela? I mean, are they able to hear the conversation as well? Or is it just the students in your classes?
Well, since we used a private grid, it was just for the students and professors and faculty of other universities that we invited. But if we would have decided, I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing it, having people from Venezuela.
Is there a resistance kind of movement in Second Life?
For Venezuela, there is an island that says Caracas. I keep tracking, but there's none yet. Facebook does have a lot, but not in Second Life. So that was one of Alfredo's ideas, was that he liked it so much that he said, why don't we get together with other universities? I have contacts with other professors that I have met in other conferences, and we do like a big event of human rights.
Yeah, well, I mean, often it's described as a disadvantage that you have these silly names in Second Life, but in a situation like this, it's covered. I mean, so it could actually be an advantage.
Yeah, when I gave the presentation in Florida, there was one professor who was interested and said, why don't we do something with the Cuban community that we have in Florida? There are so many people that want to express their stories, and they fear of bringing them to talk in public. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes.
So now you did it in private for the security. What about today's session?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that
His
too.
name was just mentioned.
Yeah, he gives presentation and he comes to the U.S., but what I have seen in real life is that when you do something open and you bring a speaker, you get from both sides, and at the end, students don't have a chance to keep it like informative or in an educational purpose, because it becomes political. Anything you bring from Venezuela becomes who says yes, who says no.
Right.
So my idea was like, to...
No, I understand, but did you say it was for his safety too? Or-
Yeah, he knows we're here, and
he knows that it's being.
Well, he was going to try to log in to see it,
So,
but
yeah.
he knows, everybody knows that he gives presentations, but the biggest fear is what he said there, questions that could be asked,
I see.
and also that was the first time since I'm here in the U.S. that I speak about him.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, the second thing I've done is follow him on Twitter, so. But other than that, yeah.
Tweets.
It's still not as dangerous at that point, But when you deal with a topic that is sensitive and you want to keep it in for an educational purpose, you don't want it to become like yes and no.
Right, right.
Okay, so here is Carolina in action teaching in the classroom. There is no audio here. We got this footage from a company, a magazine called Good, that came in and actually videotaped some of the classrooms. So we were lucky enough to get this little B-roll from them, which is kind of nice, just to show that the students look so engaged. And then, I didn't tell Carolina about this, but we had a student interview, and I wanted...
It's definitely a class I look forward to.
Did you hear that? It's
It's
definitely
definitely a class I look forward to.
It's definitely a class I look forward to. So, yeah, so congratulations.
Oh,
That's nice. Okay, so now we're going to go on, and Tina's going to talk about some of the research that we were able to do.
Well, it's a tough act to follow. I haven't seen this before. You obviously do a lot of neat stuff. I wasn't even aware of everything that you do in your classes. I have a background in second language acquisition and research, and I've done studies looking at how using different technologies can affect language learning. And when I found out that you guys were doing all this stuff in Second Life, I kind of clung on to you to see if we could do some work together. We have done a small study this semester. We'd like to do more work starting in the fall. What we're going to be talking about is a very small segment of anything that Carolina would do in her classes. So obviously she does a lot more things than what were reported in the study. So I just want to preface the talk by saying that. What we were interested in this small study that we did was looking at CMC, which is computer-mediated communication. We can go to the next slide. CMC is called computer-mediated communication, and how using a 2D format, and we chose Skype, and a 3D format, Second Life, would affect the anxiety that students feel when speaking a foreign language. And we were also interested in looking at the students' perceptions of these and whether or not they found them useful as a classroom tool and also outside of class. Just very briefly, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I wasn't sure who my audience would be. The foreign language anxiety has been researched for about 30 years in this field. And the results of foreign language anxiety can be that students avoid certain difficult structures, they reduce the topics that they'll talk about, and they speak less often. And that's a real problem in learning because a lot of theories of second language point that students have to be able to speak in order to learn the language, and they have to be able to negotiate. So for example, if I'm talking to Carolina in Spanish, which I don't know much Spanish unfortunately, but if I were to say, oh, what was that word? Could you repeat that word for me? That's an example of negotiation, and that helps students sort of solidify their knowledge in their heads. So anxiety is a big problem for instructors, and we have to find ways to get students past that so that they can learn. Computer-mediated communication used to mean, back in the day when I was in grad school, email and really just written forms, text chat. And the research at that point, looking at these types of computer-mediated communication, found that more anxious students did talk more, did participate more in discussions than they might have in oral communication. And some research showed that this actually helped students to produce better speaking eventually because they had a chance to test out the forms. There was a common sense belief that all forms of CMC present less threatening environment for communication, and that this will help students talk more and reduce their anxiety. So what we were interested in this study was looking at these more sophisticated forms of computer-mediated communication that actually allow students to talk to each other, because I don't think anybody has published this sort of research yet. So the research questions: what is the relationship between foreign language anxiety and Second Life and Skype? Will students experience more or less anxiety using these than in speaking in face-to-face situations? And how will students respond using Second Life and Skype in their Spanish classroom and beyond? We used 3 sections of Carolina's second year Spanish classes with a class size range of 5 to 4, from 5 on the low end to 4 on the big. 16 students completed all the activities, and 20 students participated in sort of a final wrap-up session that wasn't totally related to what we did before. So we gave the students the Foreign Language Classroom Anxiety Survey to measure their overall level of foreign language anxiety, and that's an instrument that's been used for many years. And the students completed 3 role plays with a class partner during class time, each in a different environment. We did Second Life on Monday, Skype on Wednesday, face-to-face on Friday, and this was done in a random order. And the role plays were connected to what the students were actually learning in class. And for the Second Life, we did, the students had to, and Carolina wrote all of the role plays very nicely. The students had to renegotiate a plane ticket because they had accidentally booked it for the wrong date. So students were able to had to go into a travel office to try to get the date changed and avoid a fee. In Second Life, in Skype, they had to.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? That happened in real life to me, so that's where the idea came.
I wonder if you were as successful as the students here.
No, I wasn't.
In the Skype role play, one student was applying for a job as a high school Spanish teacher at Beechwood High School. And in the face-to-face role play, a student was trying to organize a study abroad trip, talking to a study abroad counselor. So we did a demographic study, we did the anxiety survey, and at the end of each of the role plays, we gave them a very short Likert scale asking how anxious were you, with 1 being not at all anxious, 7 being very anxious. And then on the days when we used the technology, we also asked them, how easy was it to use this? Did you enjoy this? Do you think this is a good tool? Would you use it again? And a final survey that we did on the last day asked them to rate the communication settings with their preferences. The results were, first of all, our students are not very anxious. And this really doesn't come as a surprise because we do not have a foreign language requirement at CASE. So our scores were way down compared to other studies that I looked at, where there are schools that have a foreign language requirement, you're going to have more anxious students. I think our students, if they're very anxious, they're going to find something else to do. So that's good news for our faculty, that we're not really having to deal with any students that suffer from extreme anxiety. So we could not find any correlation between the anxiety and student perceptions of using Second Life and Skype. But I also found it was interesting that even if you had students who had a group of students who had a very low score, there was no preference for one technology over another. It was just really all over the place. So it seemed in our again, we did a small pilot study, that in this study, the differences seem to have more to do with individual preferences, probably personality preferences. We found that in our small study, most of the students said they preferred the face-to-face for the role plays, with Skype as the second option. But we've talked about this, and probably there are good reasons for this. One being that the students knew each other very well at that point of the semester. We did it toward the end of the semester. So any anxiety that they would have felt when speaking with someone less familiar obviously wasn't there. These are not anxious students in general. So I think...
Was it Skype with video, I suppose?
It was video, yes, it was video. But again, these students, we did this in April, so they had already known each other. Well, many of them had class together last semester as well. So this was a group of students that knew each other very well at this point. And again, this is not an anxious group of students. So if we had students that had true anxiety problems, we could have gotten different results on this part of the study.
What percentage of the students roughly have other foreign language skills?
I would say about 25 from the demographic study. There were students that we asked that question, some international students in the class and some students who had taken other languages. But a lot of the students, I think, had started with Spanish in high school, and that was their second language. Yeah, we can go on. We were also very interested, another interesting thing at CASE that you don't find at every school is that a lot of the first and second year classes meet 3 days a week and they have a lab hour every week, and that is accomplished totally online. And so we have been looking for ways to sort of make our lab hour more communicative, more interesting for students, more beneficial, because what we tend to use in our class is very asynchronous and autonomous, meaning online workbooks, where students are filling in answers. watching videos and responding to those, doing some voice recordings, but not a lot. So we asked the students, would you like to use these technologies? And all of them said yes. They would like to use these kinds of interactive technologies as part of their lab. Students made some nice comments, and this was totally, these comments, just, I did not prompt them, these are things they said. Students said things like, we don't feel like our current lab gives us enough speaking practice. We would like to use these technologies to speak more and also to gain more assessment from our instructor. So I thought that was very nice. So, can we go back just once?
Of course.
Oh, okay. And then another thing that they said that I thought was very interesting was given that a lot of the textbooks come with their own online lab, and these are very, as I said, autonomous, you know, asynchronous types of things, the students feel that, our students, that these are trial and error based, that they're not really sure they're learning a lot from them. And they said, we would really like to be able to collaborate in doing these activities. They feel like they would get more out of it if they could be in their dorm rooms, somehow communicating with peers online, even to complete these simple tasks. So for me, because I'm in charge of the language lab, this is really good information that I can take back to my faculty, and we're making inroads with that. Outside of the classroom, 60 and only 20 students were there. So this is 12 out of, 20. So this is, don't take these, totally seriously. You know what I mean? We could get different results if we had a larger number of students. 60% of the students said they would prefer using Skype for communicating with each other and native speakers. And it seemed from the comments that we got that the central themes for the students with these technologies is their relationship to real life, with students seeing Skype as being closer to real life than Second Life, because you can actually, if you're using the video component, you can see the other people. And some of the students, they like this. They want to be able to see people. They want to have this direct connection. Other students are saying, no, not so much. I kind of like being able to communicate through an avatar. And so there is this component of anxiety and nervousness, even though these students do not show up as being clinically anxious in this environment, this did appear in these responses. So a couple of the positive comments for Skype. Someone says, I would consider using these for a conversation with a native speaker. I would prefer Skype because it offers a direct connection with the other person. So that's that comment. This person says, I would prefer Skype because you can actually see the person and they are real. Another person, I'd prefer Skype. This allows you to see the face of the other speaker. This helps in learning the language so you can see the correlation between the words and the movement of the lips. Fair comment. And then if we go on, again, so obviously 40% of the students said they would prefer to use Second Life, and some of the comments they made were, I would prefer to use Second Life because it's easier to find someone to talk to, and it's more personal because you have an avatar, it's more tangible and less awkward than a random conversation in Skype. And this is this idea of what Carolina is doing, taking students on these virtual field trips where they're actually able to meet native speakers. And of course, Skype doesn't provide any opportunity to do that. Another student says, Second Life in Second Spain allows instant messaging, which is the least likely to cause anxiety for me after it's talking on Second Life. And research has shown that text-based chat is effective for students, and so this is a valid option for communication as well. Another student says, I consider using Second Life. In the past, I spoke with somebody in virtual Barcelona and found it very helpful in being able to converse in Spanish. So, and then another person says at the very end of the comment, she says, I would prefer Second Life because I wouldn't have to talk face-to-face with the person. We could talk using our avatars, which would make the experience less nerve-wracking. So just to sum up the positive comments about Second Life, some students indicate it's less threatening than face-to-face in Skype, allows you to meet native speakers, helps pronunciation, a great way to practice, but would be even better in a professional setting. And it provides a text messaging option. And then the negative perception, some students indicated that it's glitchy, sometimes it crashes on them. It can be anxiety producing for some people, and they said because they feel anxious if they can't see the other person, they can't read their facial cues. And then of course that you can't see the person, some people indicated that was an issue for them. And some people encountered in virtual field trips make inappropriate comments. And a woman who loves Second Life, I think she was our big champion for Second Life, She says she would like to have a safer environment because she doesn't like people asking her inappropriate things that makes her feel uncomfortable. Some of the perception of Skype, easy to use, close to face, can see the person's face, and you can build a relationship because you can see the person. Negative, one student indicated that webcams are anxiety producing. And I think in some instances, some schools, I know Oberlin, the director there tells me that they only do oral chats with Skype. They don't do visual because some people spend too much time playing with their hair and worried about their appearance, so they don't really get to the business of talking. More intimidating, okay, that's okay. We can move on. Some suggestions, I mean, if you guys have given tons of great suggestions, and so just to recap, the virtual field trips, I think those are great. Maybe some ways to negotiate that for the students would be to have the nervous students pair up with less nervous students or go directly with the instructor. Allow the students the option to speak or use text messaging because, as I said, based on the literature, this is also helpful. Provide safe places, which we do at CASE. Use Second Life to practice discourse needed to go to the doctor, order at a restaurant, or any situation that will be enhanced by having a contextualized environment. Because sometimes instructors can bring props into the classroom for these things, but let's face it, as instructors, it's very difficult to do that, to bring enough props. And as we saw with our travel agency example, it's nice for the students. And we did get very positive comments from that, from what you built, Sue.
Right. Yeah.
And have the students create and narrate their own videos, which Carolina does. If doing a tandem with another class, which we're hoping to do in the fall, I think it would be good to provide students ways to share their lives in the real world. For example, with Ning, which a lot of you are familiar with. It's not going to be totally free anymore starting this summer. Blogs, we're working with WordPress blogs here. They can be made private. And of course, there are other components. And even if you're going to virtual world locations, I think you can correlate that information by having students go into Google Earth in different places so they can see the place and actually make comparisons. With using Skype, how are we with time? Oh, I'm almost done. With suggestions for using Skype, I think it's good to use Skype in situations when it's plausible to use it in the real world. Like in our role play, we use that for the experience of having an interview. And I know I have a friend who's applying for a job as an instructor, a language instructor, and she has a Skype interview tomorrow. So I know that that's a very valid way to use Skype. Allow nervous students to use audio only. And I would say this is valid for Skype and for Second Life. Provide students with ways to meet native speakers. I know there are online services. One is called The Mixer. That's a professor. I don't remember where he's in the U.S., but he has developed a service where you can sign in and meet other people to communicate with. And of course, the same as what we had in Second Life, find ways for students to be able to share additional information with each other. And then some final thoughts. It does take some work to do this. It takes work on the instructor's end and on the students, so why would you go through this? I think one reason is because if you provide students with the training they need in the classroom, this will help prepare them to use it outside the classroom, which our students indicate that they want to do. And also it can help them to become lifelong learners, which is a major goal of our national standards for foreign languages. It opens up the traditional classroom, of course, and it provides them with skills needed to participate in virtual teams in a globalized society. I have a friend who's a business professor, and she works on this concept of virtual teams. And she tells me how important it is that people learn the skills now to be able to participate in virtual teams. So I think this is good education we could provide our students at this point.
Oh, yeah. Is it? Yeah, we've got 5 minutes left, so go ahead.
I'm done.
Carolina, yes.
Yeah, after hearing Tina and the great work with the research and the feedback we got, I would just add, for all those professors that are willing to use Second Life, it's very interesting, especially the side, I can speak for the side of the teacher. I see their great work, how the creativity plays an important role. Be prepared to laugh a lot. Sometimes when I'm correcting the presentations, I had this student with a huge avatar that I wasn't ever able to tell him, why are you like that? He was huge, it was like a monster. And then the day of the presentation, it was because he was from outer space. So he was visiting Earth, and Earth was Second Life. So you can face from something, an animal. I have had students that were bunnies. We had a bunny once. So all that space for creativity, I think, is very important. And of course, I'm a true believer that you can't supplement, the human contact. You will never be that. But I believe that Second Life has much more to offer in terms of creating that connection of what is reality, what do we have in Second Life, and how we can use it. I think there are many, many ways, more than role plays, and that students can even go farther than what I ask. So,
Great. It's fantastic. And I have to tell you, from being in Carolina's classroom, I see the excitement generated in the students, and they love it. I've wanted to start to learn Spanish now, which I...
Well, yeah, it's funny. They do stay sometimes.
Yeah,
I have a class,
yeah.
and then the next one, I see some students from the first class stay in the other one.
Yeah, they do.
That won't
They
happen
stay
in real life
no,
ever.
No,
So, yeah.
no, exactly. So,
Well, thank you. Any
thank
questions?
you.
Yes.
I have a question. I'm not terribly familiar. Oh, hello. I'm not terribly familiar with Second Life. I've used it once. It was right after last year's CollabTech. Wasn't too successful with it. But I did notice in the pictures you were talking about there was violence and blood on the streets. I noticed one of the avatars was carrying a bow and arrow. The person she was talking to appeared to be Medusa.
Right.
How does that all work out in Second Life? I mean, do they really engage in warfare or violence between avatars?
Well, that little sword that you saw there it was my student. That was a gift that she got from Second Life. So she would carry it with she met somebody and that person had a sword, so it gave it to her. You can transfer things. I encourage my students to stay at the PG islands. Okay, they have no need in the class, and I don't think they really go to other islands. That was just an example probably of an island that some violence went on, and that was the scene that they recreated. So there's not actual something happened. It's more a recreation. We have a Holocaust museum also.
Yes, a Holocaust museum.
So it's a very
that does
interesting
look-
place to visit, and they
Right.
have recordings. So you can have scenes of explosion and nice islands like Hawaii. You can get married in Hawaii. So it goes from all that. But yeah, you should be careful where, yes.
There's not any place in Second Life that has explicit violence like some video games. That's just not part of it. It's not a game environment. So there's no way to inflict damage on another avatar, for example. So no one can shoot you and you won't bleed. It's just not part of the environment.
Right.
What happens is that if you go and explore around in Second Life, there are lots of communities that are relatively closed communities. And so when people kind of pop in randomly, sometimes they're not nice to you. Okay. That happens in real life too, and it's really not any different than that. And people do, express the way that they dress and make their avatars is wildly variable. Some places you go, everybody looks very businesslike. Some places it's all fantasy, and it's more of a reflection of how they use Second Life than anything else.
Yeah, that's true. What Larry's saying, I'll add, I had a student that she went in Second Life. Her project was to ask people about how they were dressed. So for these avatars, I have very short mini skirts, if they would get comments. So her idea was to see if what kind of comments and were they appropriate or not in Second Life. So, but yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I found my limited experience with Second Life, I find it difficult, and I'm kind of geeky, so I'm normally pretty comfortable with this stuff, to really figure out how to use it. I mean, I would find that there's a hurdle to be fluent with Second Life, forget language.
Right.
Do the students here, are they that comfortable with it that you don't need to worry about that when they come into class? Or that,
Well, it does take at the beginning, I post some instructions on Blackboard. I go step by step. And as time passes, it gets easier. Sometimes I try to help them, they create their account on their own. What I do is I ask them to give them their names, and then I add friendship. So I have a control of the list of who are my students. But it's not difficult for them. I haven't seen that as a problem.
Okay.
Maybe one or two that have
problems. They're probably not building buildings or
No, they're not
things
building.
like
My
that.
students are not building. We have
Unless they
Sue
do that
here.
on their own, but
Yeah,
yeah,
they
yeah,
could.
exactly.
But also I have Sue too, that she comes to my class once and helps them out how to move the camera control, so when they're doing their presentation, they can have nice snapshots of what they're doing. I do that also in class, as you saw in the little video. It's not something that I would leave on their own. They just need to be helped, and I use Blackboard a lot for posting instructions. I give them like a small video of how to move for the introductory island that might sometimes be a little bit confusing.
You know, I think it is a little bit different with the students. I know this is taking it to a very young age, but I'm starting to work with 9 to 12-year-olds, bringing them into the private grid that we have. And in just 4 sessions, they have, you know, begun to do just about anything you could possibly do except for scripting. And even some of the students have been starting to ask about the scripting language now. And they're just such naturals at it, you know. They know how to walk immediately. They know, you know, I thought I might have some difficulty with teaching them building, but
I
they...
thought there was an age limit on.
No, yes, we have a private grid, which is the Second Life Enterprise solution. So we have total control of who comes in and who doesn't into that version of Second Life. And that's one of the reasons that we did that as case. We wanted to have an extra layer of privacy for healthcare purposes, for that kind of training, for patient-doctor interactions, and also for, you know, K-12, right? So it's been extremely exciting to work with those kids in that environment. It's been fantastic. So. And we can start to teach them languages in there.
Yeah, that's the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.